My name is Vanessa Tsehaye. I'm the founder and executive director of the Eritrean human rights organization, One Day Seyoum. According to the invitation I received, this roundtable is being organized at the European Parliament to understand the problem that Eritrea presents in the international arena and the options that Europe has to deal with these problems. I would like to deviate slightly from the assumption behind that premise of Eritrea as a sole perpetrator and Europe as a potential savior, because I do not think it accurately reflects the dynamics and challenges currently at play in the Eritrean human rights crisis. The crisis does not just include the abuses that happen inside of the country, but also the atrocities that Eritreans face after they flee. The Eritrean government is a brutal and inhumane group responsible for decades-long systemic abuse against Eritrean people, but they have not acted alone to create the crisis that exists today. The 2020 mass protest that broke out in the US following George Floyd's murder and quickly spread globally was quickly adopted by movements all over the world that both stood in solidarity with the mass protest, whilst also addressing systemic abuses against people of color in their own country. I was disappointed, but not surprised, that the European Union's migration policies never came under fire during that period. The EU's migration policies, or EU's war on refugees, as I prefer calling it, has been decades-long conflict by one of the richest entities in the world against some of the world's most vulnerable individuals. The purpose of this war has always been simple: to stop as many refugees from coming to Europe, no matter the cost. This war is not about capacity. Europe can afford to take in refugees. Report after report after report has proven that the cost of opening safe and legal routes to Europe would never even begin to compare to the billions after billions after billions that the EU continues to spend in the war against refugees. No, this war is not about capacity. It's about race. The EU simply does not want non-white refugees to come here. This was made even more clear by the language used and policies passed to make Ukrainian refugees exceptions from their war on refugees last year. The European Union's war on refugees is an attempt to abandon their obligations under international law whilst pretending still obliged by them. They're legally obliged to offer asylum to anyone who successfully applies it, and to avoid that responsibility, they have funded, trained, and equipped armed groups and states to make the roads to Europe as dangerous and deadly as possible. Of course we offer asylum, they say, but only if you're willing to die for it. At least 80% of Eritreans who apply for asylum in Europe receive it. If they would be able to access the asylum process safely, they wouldn't have to waste years and money on the different routes trying to get here, risking their lives or suffering unimaginable horrors such as torture, slavery, and sexual violence before getting what they're legally entitled to after they come here. The European Union's brutal, inhumane, and unlawful war on refugees is the largest stain on Europe's conscience since the Second World War. The worst part about this war is that it's being committed by an institution pretending to be a guardian for human rights and pointing fingers at others. And they're able to get away with it because a vast majority of Europeans don't know much about what's happening on our shores and in other countries related to this war. This war has affected Eritreans specifically in two ways. Firstly, the European Union is directly responsible for much of the abuse against them after they flee, specifically in Sudan, Libya, and on the Mediterranean Sea. Secondly, the European Union has also indirectly been responsible for the abuses against them in Eritrea for certain periods of time. As a part of their war on refugees, the EU also provides, and has provided in the past, development aid to stop migration by addressing the root causes. They claim that Eritreans are economic migrants and that to address the root causes, they need to invest into development. They're saying they're trying to stem migration, but everyone, including the EU, knows that these people are not economic migrants. They know that the issues in Eritrea are not political. They know that the issues in Eritrea are not economical, they're political. That money to Eritrea isn't going to address the root causes. Even the humanitarian crisis that's going on in the country, the minimal access to water and electricity, to food, is not related to economics. It's all about politics. And it's caused by the government's actions, not lack of access to finance. The EU has given hundreds of millions to the Eritrean government. There's barely any oversight of how that money is used. But even if they were, the stipulations for the aid has been very loose and generous. This money is instead being used to embolden the government financially, which makes the government officials more comfortable and are able to stay longer in these positions, and also provides them with more resources to tighten their security and surveillance programs and make it harder for Eritreans to defect. This, of course, was always the point. To address the root causes of migration, they don't try to change the problems in the country, just to make sure that people don't leave. Their aid also emboldens the government diplomatically, as the partnership legitimizes the Eritrean government and their portrayal of the crisis as an economic one rather than political. Many of One Day Seyoum members, including myself, are Eritreans based in Europe. Many of us were born here. This war is being fought in our names with our tax money. We, alongside all other Europeans, have a moral obligation to resist. Thank you.